course, yesterday the Finance Minister gave his maiden budget speech. Today he was speaking to members of Parliament. He faced questions from them. So let's speak now to Lindsay Dentlinger, who's been monitoring that. The issue of a basic income grant, Lindsay, came up quite strongly. Tell us what the MPs were saying and what the Finance Minister had to say.
Well, Sally, this really flows from the 350 Rand social relief of distress grant being extended for another year, but at a cost of 44 billion Rand, we learnt yesterday. And so obviously there have been calls from civil society since this grant was introduced to make it something permanent. But as we know, almost half of South Africans are reliant on a grant of some form or the other. And so the Finance Minister warning MPs today that it could lead to very unpopular choices if we had to factor in a basic income grant on a permanent basis from already constrained finances. We know that the Finance Minister gave taxpayers a reprieve yesterday in terms of lowering the tax brackets, not raising the fuel levy for the first time since 1990, but all of that could be reversed if they had to find ways to fund a basic income grant. But the Finance Minister also saying that there is no view on this matter right now. It is still something the technocrats are working on, but he hopes that before he tables the medium-term budget policy statement in October, that Cabinet would have taken some position on that particular call based on the review that is currently being done on exactly how one would fund a grant of this nature. But this is the Minister responding to several MPs who raised this question this afternoon.
We have not formed a view at all on the basic income grant. What we are saying are two things. The first one is that there are a lot of grants in the system. We simply pile a grant over each other and so on and so on. Our view, before we can talk about any grant, let's review the grant system as a whole, and then saying what would be appropriate in our conditions. That's the first point we're making. The second point we're making is that if such a review leads to an increase higher than we're currently funding, therefore, South Africans must be prepared to pay taxes.
Another issue that came up, and I'm glad it did because I don't think we got a huge amount of detail on how it's going to be managed. The massive public service wage bill, that is critical. If that's not kept under control, we cannot meet any of our budget goals, really. What did the Minister say? What were the questions that were being asked around that today?
Well, again, this afternoon, the Minister being very cautious about how he responds to this particular issue. He didn't provide too much extra information, saying only that he didn't want to preempt wage talks and talks with the unions, which are due to begin next month. He didn't want unions to feel that he was negotiating in bad faith by over-discussing this matter with MPs and saying that there is no view right now on exactly what should be done. We know that there are differing views as to whether in fact the public service is really bloated or whether it's a case of above inflation increases over the years, putting the public sector wage bill in the position that it currently is and swallowing such a huge chunk of the budget. So the Finance Minister again saying he hopes by the time he tables his medium-term budget policy statement in October that there is maybe some kind of position on this matter, but this afternoon he certainly didn't want to say any much more than what he did yesterday when he tabled the budget in terms of how exactly this public sector wage bill is going to be contained.
And of course, it's not just the whole of South Africa watching the budget plans, it's also the world. And the ratings agency, Fitch has come out with a review. What are they saying, and what did the Finance Minister say about their approach?
Well, Fitch Ratings last night essentially saying that they weren't totally convinced that South Africa has a plan to contain its debt levels and keep its spending in check, and so that still remains a concern. But the Finance Minister is saying this afternoon that while he does take note of what the ratings agency says, as he put it, they're on our radar, he says he didn't want to enter, quote, what he said, a beauty contest with ratings agency in terms of pleasing them, because again, it could lead to unpopular choices for ordinary taxpayers. And while South Africa is government rather is trying to balance, a constrained fiscal position with trying to give cash-strapped consumers some type of reprieve in terms of those tax breaks, it could quite mean that, again, with the case of the basic income grant, that all that needs to be reversed because pleasing the ratings agencies, the minister said this afternoon, would mean that the country would need to move a lot faster in bringing down what is going to be R1 trillion in debt over the next 3 years. And so he would have to weigh up those unpopular choices if he were to please rating agencies. This was his response to questions from MPs this afternoon as to how he viewed their statement on his budget last night.
If we were to rush for recognition by them, we'll probably clash with all of you, because we'll have to cut the deficits fast. We'll have to do a number of things, and which may impact on service delivered. So we are balancing a number of things. We're cutting deficits and debt service costs, not because we want to parade in a beauty contest before the rating agencies. We're cutting these because it's in the interest of this economy, because debt service costs are rising and therefore are crowding out other spending. For us, that's the primary focus at the moment. To the extent that that primary focus can get the attention of the rating agencies, is going to be a bonus for us.
Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana there. Thank you so much. eNCA's Lindsay Dentlinger in Cape Town.